What's up, dudes? This is Jesus Loving Buddy in the house. As you can see, my soul patch is growing in quite nicely. I've been working on that one for quite a while, and I'm pretty proud of myself. Can't really tell on this light, but it's getting better. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about the Bible's authenticity, and I'm going to be stealing a lot of information from The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. It's a good one. What Lee Strobel basically did was he went around and he interviewed all of these professors trying to find evidence for Christianity. And when he started, he was an atheist, and after about 2 years, when he got done, he was a Christian. So the truth is powerful, my friends. But again, of course, this is what I believe, and you guys don't have to believe this, but I just want to throw some stuff out at you and get you to think about it. So yes, I recommend this. This is the DVD, but there's also a book, and he has many other books as well. Okay, starting with Professor number 1. His name is Mark Strauss. He's a professor of the New Testament at Bethel Seminary. And I quoted him saying, historian Eusebius recorded early church father Pompeius saying that Mark's gospel was the eyewitness account of Peter. Pompeius was a disciple of the Apostle John, so we're only one generation away from Jesus himself. So that is considered to be a very close testimony, which allows us to conclude that the Gospels are based on eyewitness accounts. So that's some pretty heavy stuff. You got the Apostle Peter and Apostle John in there. That's some good stuff. This is some more information that Mark Strauss discussed. So all the Gospels were written in the 1st century, and they were so close to the events that eyewitnesses still would have been around when the Gospels were being recorded. So if the Gospel writers were lying and writing unfactual things, then the eyewitnesses would have been around to say, "Hey, dude, that's not right. You can't write that down." Because back in the day, this is important stuff. I mean, this was considered holy and sacred, and if you screwed it up, they were gonna, as you know, like hundreds of people were killed back in the 1st century for believing in Christ. Now I want to talk about oral tradition, which is basically the idea that all of this stuff happened in about 30 A.D. This is my timeline. Happened in 30 A.D. but it didn't get recorded until 65 A.D. And for me, until I read the book, Case for Christ, I was really skeptical about that. I was like, I can't believe this stuff. I can't. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But I've come to find out that oral tradition is pretty reliable. And a lot of people like to use the analogy of the whisper game, which is like, you whisper something into somebody's ear, and it goes through like maybe 10 people, and it comes out on the other at the end completely different from what it started. This is actually a really bad example, but today we expect everything to be filmed or tape recorded or at least written down as soon as it happened or something like that. But we don't really understand the nature of oral tradition, as says Mark Strauss. And it was actually a community event where everybody in the community saw what happened to Jesus and what Jesus did, and they came together and said, okay, this is reality. We've got to preserve this. And that way everybody in the community knew what all of the stories and all the parables and all the things that he said. And that way if anybody was telling it wrong, they would be like, hey, Bob, you're saying it wrong. You can't say that, because they would really crack the whip on that. And so it's really self-correcting all the way until it gets written down, because it was passed on by a community of disciples. I mean, this is important stuff. They're not going to let anything slide. Okay. This is J.P. Moreland, professor of philosophy, Biola University. He's the second dude I thought said some really important stuff. So he says that scholarly studies have been done on oral cultures, and we can observe what was said at the beginning of we can observe some information that was passed down, and we can say that it happened, information was passed down without changing. So oral tradition is very accurate. And he also said that we have better manuscript attestation than any other ancient document. For example, the Homer's Iliad was preserved in about 600 manuscripts, and the oldest of them is 1,000 years after the original was written down. But the New Testament has about 5,000 Greek manuscripts in the first century. So that's pretty hardcore. And he would argue that liberal and conservative scholars agree that there is an incredibly reliable New Testament. That's pretty awesome. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a list of prophecies. First prophecy is Psalm 22. With this pretty much describes Christ's crucifixion and what is going to take place, and it talks about his hands and feet are being pierced, but his joints or his bones are not broken, and his clothes are cast out in lots, and it's pretty remarkable because it describes what Christ is going through up on the cross 200 years before crucifixion is even invented, and that's pretty crazy. And remarkably, when Christ was on the cross, he actually quotes, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Which is how this psalm actually begins. So there's definitely a parallel there for show. So this prophecy was made sometime between 1010 to 970 BC, and it came true in 30 AD when Jesus was butt naked up on that cross. And so that's pretty cool. Prophecy number dos. Get it in the frame. Daniel 9:24 through 27, and it says that okay, the prophecy basically says that 490 years after Jerusalem is decreed to being rebuilt, so they would decree the rebuilding of Jerusalem, which meant like, okay, we're gonna do this now, let's do it, and it was just like a big deal. So and it basically says 490 years after that, Christ would walk through Jerusalem, and this is pretty remarkable because when this decree was made in 460, 490 years later, in 30 AD, Jesus came riding on a donkey through Jerusalem, and that day is known as Palm Sunday, and which was yesterday, April 5th, and Christ later went on to, that was Passion Week, and later on would get to be crucified that week, which is pretty remarkable that I'm making this video so close to Palm Sunday. I mean, because that's like, that's what I'm talking about, and I just think that's cool. So what's wicked cool about this is we can look at manuscripts and we can say, okay, this is dated from right here. This was written down at such and such date, and shabam, it came true in such and such date, and we can prove that because we know the times they were written down. So somebody can't say that we made that up. We can prove that it was written down here and it came true here. So that's pretty cool. And if you still don't believe the Bible is accurate, I recommend you check out the secular sources, which give pretty good information as well. Josephus, Clement, Polycarp, Ignatius, Tertullian, Origen, and Tacitus. Those are they give information that's congruent with the Bible and the effect that Jesus had on life back in Jerusalem at that time. Okay, now we're going to talk about the conversion of Paul. So at one point, Saul, he later became the Apostle Paul, but at first his name was Saul, and he was a Jew who was persecuting and arresting and even killing Christians because he thought they were evil, and they were spreading the evil around, so he's going to go stop them. But then he claimed to have met the resurrected Jesus Christ, and he later went on to write half the New Testament. So that's pretty amazing that he would go from killing people to joining them and writing books for them. That's pretty amazing. So my question to all of the people who don't believe is, why would Paul, along with Paul and 500 other people, die for something that was a lie? I would argue that it's not a lie. Christ did rise from the dead, and everybody died knowing they were going to be rewarded in heaven. Otherwise, 500 people dying for a lie is just ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, either it happened or it didn't happen, and I would argue that it did happen, and people had enough faith to die for that. So, right on, dudes. God bless.